A very good afternoon or good morning in your country, most worshipful brother MICHAEL KRAUS, and many thanks for being here and to chat about Freemasonry.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to introduce. Thank you again. I would like to introduce our audience to the Masonic life in Austria. How many Masons and lodges, if there are lodges in other languages, what dependent bodies do you have in Austria, and so on?
Yeah, we have recently 81 lodges in Austria, and we have 2 new lodges in preparation that could not be installed due to Corona. And presently we have approximately 3,700 members in the craft. We had the first year ever since Second World War of a decline in membership. Not because we do not have any applicants. We have many applicants. We have more applicants than we can initiate. But due to Corona, we had no possibility to have reception ceremonies. And very unfortunately, we had quite a number of deaths also due to Corona. So Austrian Masonry is basically still on its growth path, very moderate growth, never be beyond 3%. But we had a very difficult year in 2020. And only a couple of weeks ago, we carefully started physical gatherings. During Corona, we had online meetings. Now, but back to your question on the dependent bodies, we have now in ranking by size, York Rite consisting of chapter, council, and commanderies, more than 600 members. We have the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rite is the oldest dependent installation in Austria for many years. York Rite only started in 1974. We have the Holy Royal Arch, one lodge in Holy Royal Arch, and this is probably a worldwide unique situation. Our English Holy Royal Arch chapter is integrated in our American York Rite. They have access to meetings in the so-called 7th degree in York Rite, and they have facilitated procedures of taking part. So we have harmony in the chapter world, and we have also harmony among the Scottish Rite and York Rite. This was not always the case. We had sometimes a very competitive situation. We have now, since 2016, mutual meetings at least once a year, and we are in a very good relationship. Now we also have the Mark Masons since 2007. We have the so-called rectified Scottish Rite, but only in part of Austria, very small, but only a part. We have the conclave, and we have the unofficial. We also have the shrine. And as you might know, as it is known, we do have a small unit of irregular Grand Orient lodges also, with mixed and also women lodges. And we have a very strict regulation. There's no permit for intervisitation, although it happens occasionally. But there's also more or less a harmony even with the non-regular institutions. And as you certainly know, our very famous museum in Rosenau the only European existing lodge from the 18th century. This is open also for irregular lodges to have meetings there.
Do you have lodges in other languages?
Yes, we have since many years a Hungarian lodge, Helikon, and it is a full permit lodge. We have a French lodge, Aux Trois Canons. They work in French, and we have an English lodge, Sarastro, also in the English ritual. That is also integrated in the Austrian Grand Lodge. But ritual-wise, we have only one Austrian ritual in the craft. Except for the French have the old Scottish ritual, and the English have the English ritual as usually.
The English-speaking Grand Lodges are losing membership. It is the same situation in Austria, except in this period with pandemic. What kind of politics do you have for retaining membership?
Well, the main reason for this different development around the world primarily has to do with the position of Masonry in society. In the French and Romanesque-speaking countries, Latin America, Italy, etc., there's a tradition of having Masonry, of being in a enlightenment posture, a critical posture in society. There's a big misunderstanding in interpreting the basic principles of the United Grand Lodge of England, where it says no political religion. The meaning of that originally meant that you should stay away from political issues in the day-to-day party political maneuvering. Don't get involved in daily political controversies. But, and that unfortunately is being misinterpreted by most English-speaking lodges, you should not stay away from engagement, from interest in society. And this engagement in society has always been one of the major tasks in Masonry in continental Europe. It still is in Latin America. It is in many of the new European countries on the Eastern Hemisphere of Europe. And it is also traditionally an aspect of Masonry in the very fast-growing lodges in Africa, because most of these lodges have been founded under French influence, and France was always in the middle of social involvement. So since the knowledge of Masonry by the public in Europe, at least, is quite marked with interest in society, we do not have problems in gathering or acquiring new members, because the situation in the world is such that many people believe that parties, unions, other institutions, even religions have failed to answer questions of society, and they're looking for new means of togetherness, of new means of engagement in society, and obviously Masonry is one of them. This has been neglected or not being recognized in the English-speaking world, in the United States, in the United Kingdom. They concentrate on tradition, they concentrate on history, they concentrate on ritual. they make it very difficult for young candidates to become members working there, because the rituals are so complicated and you have to do everything by heart, that many just shy away because they're not able and willing to put that burden upon themselves. And just for the reason of fostering history is not enough. If you don't give people, young people, a content that has to do with their everyday life, they're not interested.
Absolutely. What are the relations of the Austrian Freemasonry with the authority of the state? I remember many years ago, when you told me that you were contacted by the presidency for the constitution. I like to underline this aspect. It's fantastic for me, in my opinion.
Well, look, aside from that was a very special situation. Aside from that, there's still a lot of skepticism and controversy and animosity against Freemasonry in Austria. It comes from, yes, there is. Why? Because it is unknown and people don't really develop a lot of interest in that. Austria is no longer, and Masonry is no longer in a direct conflict with Rome, with the Roman Catholic Church, but it was, and Masonry was forbidden in Austria, and Masonry obviously has the reputation of being a possible route of political maneuvers behind the scenes. And since, very important, and since Austria is not doing any public relation to rectify this picture, people, the normal people, like not the educated people, think that Masonry is something against society. Now, the educated people, people who know history, people who know that there are so many very important personalities in Austrian Masonry, they know that Masonry has contributed to the existence and the peacemaking and the European thought in Austria. And this is the reason why the former president had given agreement that Masonry be invited to a platform which had the aim of restructuring our constitution and improving our constitution. We were invited to participate. And the former president, Mr. Fischer, and his deputy, and many other people of the parliament appreciated the fact that Masonry is strong and vivid in Austria, and wanted to have Austria participate in a constitutional reform movement. But, very important, we did not participate. We declined the invitation. Why? Because it was public. And since we avoid publicity, since we avoid public relation, for a number of reasons, we preferred not to be in the show window, on the stage. And I explained that at that time to the president. He understood it and he regretted it, but he said, I understand that if a movement like Masonry wants to be catalytic and not exposed to animosities, it is better if we do not enter such a public platform.
Wow. Do you have a relation? Sorry, tell me.
Yeah, the fact that we consider ourselves not secret, but very, very private, and we do not disclose memberships, obviously also works as a mechanism to create curiosity. You know, if you have a secret, if you don't talk about it, and many people are interested just to find out what is the secret behind it, you know. So there is a certain and very strong mechanism of recruiting people out of this very strict policy of being private, of not being public, of considering ourselves a, quote, underline quote, secret society.
Do you have relations with the Austrian Freemasonry? Does it have relations with the church?
Yes.
Official relations.
Yeah. We have a tradition in the past 60s, 1968, following Pope John the 23rd, who installed a unit that would deal with movements outside the church. Our Cardinal König, Austrian Cardinal König, approached Masonry and for 10 years worked intensively in rectifying the picture and the content, the historic content of the controversies between Masonry and the church. And as a result of that, the Roman law, the church law was changed, and the excommunication, the prohibition to participate in the sacraments was abolished. We have to admit that this change in the law was not followed consequently by the administration after Pope John the 23rd. Why? Because there was a very, very conservative Cardinal Ratzinger, afterwards he became Pope himself, who did not want Masonry to be reintegrated in society as a non-anti-religious institution. He issued a paper claiming that although if you're a Mason, you're not automatically excommunicated, you're not automatically prohibited to participate in the sacraments, you live in severe sin. And I had the opportunity when I was Grand Master to have a public conversation with one of the very, very close confidants of the Pope, to have him explain what is it meant to be in sin against the Roman Catholic Church. And he explained that if there is a alliance against the church led by the Masons, then you are in sin. If you are not in a controversy or conspiracy against the church, you do not have to be excluded from participating in Roman Catholic religious institutions. So also this situation was clarified, and we have priests among our members. We had an Austrian priest who was very, very close to the Pope in Rome until very recently. And at present, Cardinal Schönborn, our present cardinal in Austria, is close to Masonry for a very personal reason. His father was a Mason. And yes, although he's not extremely interested to make that publicly known, he has a constructive, positive, and not hostile attitude. If we have candidates who don't know if they would have a problem being Catholic to become a Mason, we advise them to talk to their bishop, and if he is an educated bishop, he will know that there are no obstacles anymore that prevent Roman Catholics to become Masons.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. From your international Masonic experience, you have noticed differences between Eastern and Western European Freemasonry, between South and North America. What kind of Freemasonry do you think is closer to what Freemasonry should be?
Well, if we understand the original mandate of Masonry when it was founded more than 300 years ago, to strengthen the movement of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a creation of Masonry, but Masonry is a child of enlightenment, and enlightenment means you should make knowledge available to the people. It is a social impact that was the driving force of Masonry. And if you understand Masonry as something like that, something that is a control mechanism for dictatorship, a control mechanism for unethical behavior, and if it is a control mechanism of creating society among various beliefs, various religions, etc., Masonry does not only have a historic function, we believe that Masonry has a very, very important function in today's development. And it is very extremely unfortunate that the Masonic movements in the English-speaking world is so much involved in history and not in present society, that this is the reason why they are losing membership. Now, there are countries where this task of Masonry is well understood. The new or reinstalled Masonic institutions in the eastern part of Europe have understood that. And when I was Grand Master and I was part of the Sinaya conference, etc., as you very well know, Claudio, we had the strongest interest and impetus to make Masonry a united movement in that spirit. And it came from the East. And it also comes, obviously, from Latin America and from the southern part of Europe. The problem that we have in Masonry is that we worship independence of the single obedience. Every lodge is independent, every obedience in every country is independent and wants to be independent. And we have failed to create mechanisms to distill the common thought of enlightenment onto an upper level, because obediences are always afraid that this could infringe on their independence. And this is a complete nonsense. Just like the United Nations is not an institution that has power on various state governments, but it is a platform of common values. And Masonry could be a platform of not only common values, but common tasks for the present and the future. And we have failed to create mechanisms that are able to handle that properly.
Michael, do you think that nowadays world needs Freemasonry like in the past?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, even more. And if we look at developments just of the very recent past, even the pandemic shows us that cross-border unity in ethical values, in discipline, is something so important that whatever institution is able to go across borders and create understanding for values. And talking to you, Claudia, as a journalist, you know how the problems that journalism has in being something professionally valuable. Anybody who thinks he can say something says it without harm, without having to fear any consequences. So there's so many tasks today that would make it important for a role like Masonry that I personally hope that we might be able to reinstall some sort of mechanism that creates more understanding of the true task of enlightenment in Masonry worldwide.
Mm-hmm. So Freemasonry is not eroded. It's
no, not at all. Not at all. It is misinterpreted. It is misinterpreted by many, and primarily by the ones that are strong in numbers and strong in history. I have many friends in the United States and the United Kingdom, and I try to explain to them. And when they come to Europe and visit our lodge work, then they say, "Oh God, we didn't know that Masonry could be like this." And what do they do instead? They think Masonry is charity.
Exactly.
Masonry is not charity. Charity is a quality of a matter of fact. Everybody has to be charitable. But charity is not a Masonic program. And if you think that Masonry is only charity, then you, number one, get in conflict with all sorts of service institutions that are much better in raising money than Masonry, and you get into a very, very harmful competition against institutions that are completely different than ours, just because of the misunderstanding that Masonry is charity. Masonry is not charity. A Mason has to be charitable, but Masonry is not a charitable organization.
I agree. The public perception of Freemasonry has changed over time. What has led to these variations? A good public perception results, in my opinion, in an increase in number of members.
Well, it is very different from country to country. You cannot proclaim one single recipe for that. As I explained before, in the Austrian situation, the more we refrain from being publicly observed, the more interest we create. Obviously, we have a subtle, if you like, public relation. The book that I published in 2007 was extremely successful. And since it was a book, and since it was not something virtually something physical, something that cannot be changed, it's written, it cannot be changed. It was read, and it became a good source of information for Masonry, and it brought us a great number of new candidates. I know that in countries that never had the problem of a controversy between state and Masonry, like in the United States, for instance, or even in the United Kingdom, a good and positive public relation creates membership. But the problem is the product is wrong. If the Americans do public relation for the existing Masonry in the United States, then people say, okay, now what? I have to go into an association that deals with the 18th century. What is the task of Masonry today? They don't talk about that. They don't talk about that. And if they don't talk about that, and if they only say, well, we take good men and we make them better. Yes, obviously, but that's not enough to attract people. Absolutely. Who would say I'm not a good man? Who would say I'm not a good man? And would be. Everybody wants to be looked upon as a good man to be better. And you don't need an association that claims to do that, because you're not credible with just that claim. So I think that many countries have managed to have a good relationship with their obediences, with their state obediences. Among them, for instance, in Poland, even in Italy. Italy has always been a big problem because the past of Garibaldi, who was actually trying to kill the Pope. So yeah. There are historic mortgages on that, but to the extent that people understand that Masonry is not something against human beings and against the state, it is not very difficult to install good relationships. But the more we try to force that, the more dangerous it becomes. A subtle way of doing information and public relation is better than advertising in newspapers like they do it in the United States, or sometimes even, unfortunately, in Germany. That's the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. What is the most difficult problem facing Freemasonry nowadays?
Well, Masonry is not a homogeneous institution. It is different in every country, as we know. And the problem for the future of Masonry, as I said before, primarily has to do with the fact that we have not been able to combine information on the true value of Masonry around the world, within the Masonic world. We have not managed to use electronic information tools to create more understanding of the true values of Masonry. We are stuck in the 19th century, both in our attitudes and in information mechanism among ourselves. So Masonry has failed to install communication that would make it possible for us to identify the true and modern values of Masonry. And there have been attempts here and there to be more modern, to be more communicative within the organization. The appendant bodies are doing that much better because they're better organized internationally. But in the crafts world, and this is Masonry in its great numbers, we have failed to install the right mechanisms to deal with the problems of society. It is the lack of structures, not the lack of gaining power over obediences, no, but the lack of being able to create platforms.
Mm-hmm. How surpasses pandemia the Freemasonry in Austria? What lessons should be learned from the pandemic period?
Well, the pandemic experience had definite benefits. Number one, we have been experimenting with virtual meetings, and we have understood that virtual meetings can be an addition to Masonic liaisons. It cannot be a substitute. This is also something that we have learned. You cannot do ritual work in a virtual environment.
Of course.
It does not make sense. It does not work. And you should not attempt to substitute physical meetings in ritual circumstances. But we have learned to deal with the content of Masonry, with subjects that deal with society. This you can do virtually, this you can do in meetings, and you have many more participants than you would have if you have to meet physically. I have made the experience of an initiative, of an American initiative. But please forgive my critical attitude vis-a-vis American Masonry. There's a lodge, and there are very many exceptions, not the majority, but there are exceptions. One lodge in New York, John Philip Sousa Lodge. Yeah, it was created as an international platform. It was created as a virtual lodge to tie up with other lodges around the world. And my Blue Lodge, Prometheus in Vienna, takes part of it, and it is an extremely fulfilling experience to exchange yourself on a Zoom environment with Americans in New York and explain to them the difference between Masonry around the world. And the big benefit of Masonry, wherever it is and whatever content it has, it is a brotherhood. You are able and willing to listen to your brother abroad. They're not arrogant. There's no arrogance. There's no arrogance. There's a very fraternal attitude. The fraternal attitude is really the quintessence of Masonry, and that makes you optimistic to hope that this fraternal attitude would make it possible to put away with the deficiencies that we have. So there are certain things happening in the pandemic situation that will have an effect for the future in the next years. Pandemic has its virtues, has its benefits.
How do you see the future of Freemasonry? Tell me, please.
Well, I'm not very optimistic.
Why?
Why? Because having been an official in Masonry for such a long time, and since I have no career ambitions anymore, I can say it very frankly. The problem is that many members, most of the members, are very strong personalities. Okay, not people that are soft and willing to learn and willing to accept things. No, they come with their own set of mind, and they have a very strong character. And as soon as they gain power, they use this power to fulfill their own personal interests, and they forget about our common interests in Masonry. So the selection of high-ranking people in Masonry is driven by people who forget that the fraternal attitude means that you have to put away with your own personal subjective interests. Unfortunately, if you had more people on the top that are less strong personalities, you might have a better chance to create common platforms to make things happen. No, as soon as the important and powerful Mason is on the top, he's unable and unwilling to deal with the others.
We know a lot of
it's just a very general remark. I do it on purpose.
Of course.
Obviously, you know, Claudia, and I know there are many exceptions, and there are many high officials that I esteem very highly and greatly, but
normal guys.
They have not been, yeah, but they've not been able to change the play.
Correct.
Unfortunately.
Correct. Finally, my dear most worshipful brother, let us know your curriculum vitae, both Masonic and profane. And finally, please explain, I know you are a member of the Board of International Masonic Affairs. I don't know what is this. Explain to me and through me to the other people, please. Yeah, because I didn't find any materials on the internet. You are very, Board of International Masonic Affairs is very, I cannot say strictly, I don't know, but it's not on the spot. Yeah. I don't find.
Yeah, I can explain that. Now, coming back to your question, my profane curriculum, I'll make it short. I was born in Salzburg. I moved as a child. I moved to Vienna. I studied the business. I became a banker. I worked in the United States for the Chase Manhattan Bank. I have served in the banking industry, international banking industry, for some years in the United States, in Germany, and in Austria. And then I became partner in a private investment banking company in Austria, which I still am, called Donnerfinanz. I'm a private entrepreneur, a small investment bank. I don't want to talk about that because banks have a very bad reputation these days. Okay, I have to do with real estate and other things, and I have a very international attitude, and I was very happy to have a lot of experience, also business experience, in your beautiful country, Romania. Very positive experience, by the way. I'm married. I have 3 children, and my children are already, my son is in the art industry. My eldest daughter has followed me in my business career, and our middle daughter is a physician. So my family is in a very good shape. I'm very happy, and my wife is in the hotel industry. She was the president of the European Hotel Association. She is the president of the Hotel Association in Austria. So we have a lot to do with tourism. And obviously, due to the pandemic situation, her hotel interests have been very much hampered and affected by the pandemic. But we are optimistic, and since I had the chance to acquire a property here in Italy 3 years ago, in one of the most beautiful spots in the world in Tuscany, I'm very happy, so I cannot complain. My profane personal life is in good balance and okay. I was initiated in Masonry in 1979 in Vienna, Austria. I was in the Lodge Zukunft at the beginning, then Lodge Prometheus, and I was Worshipful Master for a number of years, and then I entered the Board of General Purposes and became a Grandmaster in 2002 until 2008. And after I had served in the craft, I was always member of the York Rite in Austria. And in 2017, I was offered the position of a Deputy General Grand High Priest of the chapter Masonry in Europe and Africa. This is part of York Rite. York Rite is an American organization, and in this organization, I still have a number of functions, and I'm no longer Deputy General Grand High Priest, but I serve in a number of international committees. And the beauty and the benefit of the American York Rite is that it is really truly internationally organized. The Board of International Masonic Affairs, called BIMA, Board of International Masonic Affairs, is an installation in the York Rite in the United States, in the General Grand chapter, in the chapter world of the United States. It consists of only 8 members, and it is an advisory committee to the highest officer of the International Grand Chapter of the General Grand High Priest. They do not have an executive function. They advise him of Masonic political issues around the world. Now, the York Rite Institution is an international platform around the globe. It gives its members a lot of freedom, but it is vertically organized. And if you want to be a member in the international organization of York Rite, you have to adhere to a number of common policies and to get a charter. And if you do not adhere to the policies, then you might lose your charter. So there is a certain influence on the quality of work in the appendant bodies. That's the same in the Scottish Rite. And since York Rite has become quite strong, and it's quite strong internationally and in Europe, and it's growing in Africa and in other countries, I'm very happy to be able to still contribute to the international floor by being a member of the Board of International Masonic Affairs.
Mm-hmm. Now I know. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you again for being with us today.
Great pleasure.
From Italy. From Tuscany. Wow, splendid.